What if one trade deal could not only eliminate barriers, but also ignite a 66% surge in economic growth, fueling innovation and energy cooperation across continents? That's the power of CETA, Canada's game-changing agreement with the EU. Since its provisional launch in 2017, the Canada-EU Comprehensive Economic and Trade Agreement has not only eliminated trade barriers, but has also driven a remarkable 66% surge in bilateral trade. This unprecedented growth has laid a solid foundation for even stronger energy partnerships and broader economic collaboration between Canada and the European Union. In today's session, we'll unpack how this trade agreement is reshaping industries, boosting job creation, and helping Canada diversify its global markets, all while countering external pressures like US tariff threats. Join us as we delve into the success story behind one of today's most impactful free trade agreements. Chapter 1: EU's energy dependence on Russia. For many years, the European Union's energy dependence on Russia was a cornerstone of its energy strategy. In fact, in 2021, Russia supplied about 45% of the EU's natural gas, a significant portion. If you take Germany as an example, Russia provided more than 50% of its natural gas, and countries like Italy and Finland were similarly reliant. Additionally, Russia contributed to about 25% of the EU's oil imports in 2021. However, the geopolitical landscape changed dramatically with Russia's invasion of Ukraine in early 2022, prompting the EU to rethink its energy strategy. The EU's response to this crisis was swift. By the end of 2022, the EU aimed to cut its dependency on Russian energy by 2/3, a monumental shift. The ultimate goal was to fully phase out Russian fossil fuels by 2027. This marked the beginning of a deep transformation in Europe's energy market and sent shockwaves across global energy markets. For ordinary Europeans, this abrupt shift meant sharp increases in energy prices. The cost of natural gas surged by a staggering 450% in 2022. In Germany, heating costs for the average household rose by about 31% year-on-year in 2023, which caused real hardship for many families. The government implemented energy-saving measures and rationed gas usage, forcing people to rethink how they used energy daily. For example, households reduced heating, used more energy-efficient appliances, and adopted lifestyle changes to cope with the higher costs. It also placed pressure on businesses, particularly those in manufacturing and transportation, who faced higher operational expenses, which eventually trickled down to the prices of everyday consumer goods. Chapter 2: The US becomes the EU's primary LNG supplier. With the EU's sudden need to replace Russian gas, the United States emerged as the primary supplier of liquefied natural gas (LNG). In 2022 alone, US LNG exports to Europe surged by 137%, reaching 82 billion cubic meters of LNG. By 2022, nearly 40% of the EU's LNG came from the US, marking a significant shift in energy partnerships. But while the US stepped in to fill the energy void, this transition hasn't come without complications. The US is politically unpredictable, and there's always the looming possibility of tariff impositions or export taxes, particularly given the volatility in US domestic politics. For Europeans, the reliance on US LNG has translated into higher energy prices. The cost of LNG has increased by 25% to 30% across various European markets due to the transportation and liquefaction costs associated with importing from the US. For households, this meant higher bills, and for businesses, especially in energy-intensive industries, operating costs skyrocketed. The result is inflation in basic consumer goods, further straining household budgets across the EU. Meanwhile, in the US, domestic energy prices rose as a consequence of the export boom, with energy bills for the average US household expected to climb by 10% to 15%. Chapter 3: The US political uncertainty and tariff threats. Political uncertainty in the United States remains a potential threat to this fragile energy relationship. In 2018, the Trump administration imposed tariffs of up to 25% on certain energy exports, including natural gas. While such tariffs were not broadly imposed across the board, the possibility of new taxes on energy exports under the Biden administration has kept energy markets on edge. These potential taxes are intended to fund climate initiatives, but their introduction could disrupt the growing export trade between the US and Europe. If the US government reinstates tariffs or taxes energy exports, consumers on both sides of the Atlantic could be in for more pain. In Europe, tariffs on US LNG could cause even higher prices for energy imports, pushing up household energy bills and disrupting industrial supply chains. For everyday Americans, tariffs or export taxes could lead to increased domestic energy prices, forcing families to adjust their consumption patterns. It's expected that residential energy prices could climb by as much as 15% to 20%, potentially putting more financial strain on lower-income households. Chapter 4: Canada's growing role in the global energy market. As Europe seeks alternative sources of energy, Canada has emerged as a growing player in the global energy market. In 2023, Canada exported over 4.84 million barrels of oil per day, making it the fifth largest oil exporter in the world. The EU, which had previously relied heavily on Russia, began increasing its imports of Canadian oil and LNG. Canada's ability to supply both oil and LNG is particularly crucial as European demand continues to rise. Canada is also investing heavily in LNG infrastructure, with the LNG Canada project in British Columbia set to become one of the largest LNG export facilities globally by 2025. The project alone is expected to export up to 14 million tons of LNG per year, significantly increasing Canada's energy export capacity. For Canadians, this growing demand for their energy exports could lead to more jobs in the energy sector. Alberta and British Columbia, which are home to Canada's oil and gas reserves, could see a boost in employment in sectors like construction, engineering, and energy infrastructure. However, the increase in energy exports also brings environmental concerns. Local communities, especially those in the extraction zones, may experience altered daily lives, with possible disruptions due to construction, changes to local landscapes, and environmental impacts from fossil fuel extraction. For Europeans, Canadian energy offers a more stable and predictable supply compared to other global suppliers. This could stabilize energy prices in the medium to long term. The EU might also find Canadian energy more sustainable and reliable, which would benefit consumers through more affordable and secure energy sources, especially as Canada's environmental regulations are stricter than other major exporters. Chapter 5: Canada's shift toward Europe and Asia. While Canada is focusing on supplying more energy to Europe, it is also expanding its energy exports to Asia. Countries like China and Japan have been increasing their demand for Canadian oil and LNG. And Canada's energy export agreements with Asian nations are expected to grow by 10% annually over the next 5 years. By 2027, Canada's energy exports to Asia are projected to reach over $10 billion. This shift toward Asia is significant for the global energy market, as it adds a new dynamic to Canada's energy strategy, diversifying its export markets and reducing its reliance on any one region. For Canadians, this shift toward Asian markets means potentially greater revenue from global energy sales, which could result in stronger economic stability and increased job opportunities in the energy sector. However, this also poses challenges for local communities in terms of environmental impact, as expanding energy exports might lead to increased industrial activity and higher pollution levels. For Europeans, the shift toward Asia may mean more competition for Canadian energy, potentially driving up prices in Europe. Chapter 6: Canada's trade with the EU. A growing partnership. Canada and the EU have significantly strengthened their economic ties since the implementation of the Comprehensive Economic and Trade Agreement (CETA) in 2017. Bilateral trade between the two partners has surged by 66% since then, laying the foundation for even stronger energy cooperation. With Canada poised to increase its oil and LNG exports to the EU, this partnership is likely to continue growing, benefiting both regions. For Canadians, this deeper trade relationship could lead to stronger economic growth, with more opportunities in sectors such as energy, manufacturing, and technology. For Europeans, it could translate into a more stable and diversified energy supply, with lower long-term energy costs and greater energy security, meaning less fluctuation in energy prices during global crises. As we've seen, the shifting energy dynamics between Russia, the EU, the US, and Canada are not just a matter of politics or economics. They are shaping the way we live our daily lives. From higher energy bills in Europe to potential political uncertainties affecting global supply chains, the ripple effects of these changes will touch us all in one way or another. The increasing importance of Canadian energy exports to the EU and other global markets is a clear sign that the landscape is evolving rapidly. Whether it's in the form of job creation, rising costs, or even environmental impacts, these changes are a sign of a much larger shift happening right before our eyes. The road ahead may be uncertain, but one thing is for sure: global energy partnerships are more important than ever, and they will continue to shape our world in profound ways. The world now stands at a crossroads, The decisions made today by governments, corporations, and global policymakers will determine whether this trade war propels economies towards self-sufficiency or drags them into prolonged volatility. One thing is certain: this trade war is not just a battle between two nations, it is shaping the future of global trade as we know it. So, what do you think? Is this economic confrontation a necessary step toward independence, or is it a dangerous game that could lead to long-term economic hardship? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you want to stay updated on the latest developments in global trade, don't forget to subscribe for more in-depth analysis and discussions on the evolving economic landscape.